The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hello and welcome to Empower Dyslexia. I'm your host, Stephen Yearout, and I have to tell you, it feels so good to be back in the studio, Ziggy.
It's great to have you back.
Man, it feels like it's been forever in a day, and I'm so excited to be back in studio and back at it. This show is here to help each of us be a better informed parent and partner in education. On the show, we discuss dyslexia and other related disorders. We discuss research, intervention, special education policy. We also interview experts in their field and people with personal stories. I want to make sure that please go out and like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. It really helps with all of our numbers and our sponsors. If you like to watch us live, you can obviously see it on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and then you can listen to any of our podcasts on any of your favorite podcast apps. iHeartRadio, I mean, you can see them all there. It's just a plethora. If you have that app, we're there. Make sure that you subscribe, comment, and leave us a like. Today's topic is something that's very near and dear to my heart and something that I really wanted to, in my advocacy work, really wanted to try to tackle. Today's topic is about cutting off the pipeline to prison. And, there's lots of statistics and lots of studies out there that our children with dyslexia can and a lot of times do end up in the system, whether as juvenile and or as an adult. And I couldn't have found a better guest. I mean, our guest today is an award-winning educator, author, contributor, speaker. He was an assistant regional superintendent, high school and elementary school principal. He started his teaching career in a state facility that's serving incarcerated male juveniles. How I found out about our guest was I watched his TEDx talk, What Incarcerated Youth Can Teach Teachers. So I would like your help in welcoming Mr. Pelzer to our show. It's an honor. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Steve. Good morning. Good morning to your audience. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for thinking about me and reaching out about my story. And hopefully my story can help spread the word about not only reading instruction, incarcerated youth, but some of the barriers that our children are facing instructionally as they move through their educational careers.
Absolutely. So, I mean, my introduction of you does your story no justice. So can you please give our audience just a little more information about you and, what drove you down that path of advocacy and passion for education and helping our disadvantaged youth?
Mm-hmm. So I never imagined being in the space that I am in terms of education, leading schools, being a principal. When I came out of college, my aspiration at the time was sports management. It was to be a big time coach or athletic director or general manager for an NBA team or something like that. But I took a job coming out of college as a physical education teacher, as you indicated in your opening, at a juvenile correctional facility. And it was in that setting, Stephen, that I decided to become a principal, because I observed on many days illiteracy among many of our young people, a fear of learning, and just an apathy or interest that was really overwhelming to me, that I decided to go back to school for education administration and do something about helping young people learn how to read. I didn't know what that looked like then. I just felt bad about what I was seeing then. And over the years, I've used it to propel me into how I look at education through the lens of reading instruction.
I mean, the studies that show that 80% of our population in prison are functioning illiterate, and then 50% or higher have dyslexia, I mean, just screams to exactly what you're talking about. And this is, nationwide. So if we're not teaching the reading, writing, math, we are filling that pipeline to prison.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you were working in the juvenile detention center, I mean, what was the number one thing that you saw was the biggest problem? I mean, I understand education, but what was the number one thing that you saw was where these kids had been failed?
Yeah, so definitely reading, definitely literacy. In the physical education space, students were very active, have conversations with you. They were very athletic, physical, could maneuver around athletic fields and those type of things. But in the classroom, they were very meek and mild and quiet. And what I saw was not being able to read, small words, large words, not able to understand syllables, not able to write. A lot of their writing was in a graffiti type of format versus printing or cursive. Basic grammar, punctuation, vocabulary, those are the things that jumped out at me. But throughout the day and throughout opportunities to see them in other educational spaces, I saw the same thing in math. I saw the same thing in social studies. It was really that fear of wanting to avoid exposure or being embarrassed about what they did not know. And that's what really jumped out at me. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't know at the time, I was young in my early 20s, that it was that type of despair happening. My parents are both educators. My mom is a retired principal. My father is a retired guidance counselor. And so I was always exposed to education and understood the importance in power education. But I was seeing you read about it, but I was seeing firsthand what it looks like when you don't have an education. And these young people who did not have an education, Stephen, they were incarcerated. And they were incarcerated at a young age. They were between the ages of 13 and 17. And so when we think about incarceration, we think about adults, we think about the prison industrial system and those type of things. But these were young people who were incarcerated at a very young age. And the trend or the common theme was reading or the illiteracy, the inability to read.
Well, when you are on the top of the echelon when it comes to sports, and everybody looks up to you because you can either, play basketball or run really fast, you're an excellent football player or something like that, you put a shell or you put a front on because you don't want to, like, you hit it perfectly. You don't want to be exposed in that educational setting, in the classroom, as being stupid. You don't want your peers to ever be able to see that you really don't know how to read and write and spell, because those same peers that are looking up to you would be the same peers that would point the finger and laugh at you.
Right.
And that's the reason why, we see the behavior problems out of those children also, because instead of facing that fear of, hey, I can't read, write, spell, do math, whatever, it's easier and less, and this doesn't make, to the average person, it doesn't make any sense, but it's less painful to cause the problem and get in trouble
Right.
and go to the office than it is to take the ridicule from your peers.
Absolutely. So it's avoiding, it's finding ways to avoid what I know I don't know, right? So I avoid it. And if the teacher or a helpful classmate or a helpful adult doesn't also notice that I'm avoiding, right, I don't get the help I need. And if I can continue the pattern of avoiding by acting out, by walking out the room or doing something disruptive, that gets attention. And oftentimes we focus on that behavior. We focus on how to even correct that behavior, but not to the point of, is it instruction? Is it reading? Is it content that I need to correct for this child versus trying to figure out maybe that child needs a behavior modification program, that child needs to be on a behavioral contract, or all those kind of things. We look at solving it that way instead of looking at it from an instructional lens.
Talking about being on a BIP or a behavioral contract, I would also love to see there be there is a social contract with education to make sure that we educate our children. But behavior is a symptom of a larger problem. And if you're not digging into why that behavior is there, especially in the younger grades, then we are missing the boat.
Right.
I have never met a child that didn't want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to see if you're going to put that child on a behavioral contract, we need to put the school system on a educational contract. You have to educate that child. That's your charter. Your charter as an ISD, as public education, is to teach every child, no matter their ability or disability.
Absolutely.
It's simple.
Absolutely. Going back to the young students at the Juvenile Correctional Facility, in this facility in Pennsylvania at the time, this was the late 80s, early 90s, there were about 9 of these, what they call youth development centers, and they were state facilities for incarcerated juveniles, mostly all boys. My facility where I worked was all boys. And as I said, to see young people, 13, 14, 15, maybe up to 17, incarcerated at that time, when we talk about behaviors, this wasn't their first time incarcerated. This was 2 or 3 or more times incarcerated. In fact, some of them had been incarcerated so often that their earlier incarcerations, they were sent to private facilities or reform type facilities. And those facilities then got tired of them returning, recidivism, and decided that they needed to be placed in a state facility. And so they embarked on crime and other activities because they got in trouble in school, they got in trouble in the neighborhood, they avoided school, and eventually went down a path of getting in trouble and committing crimes because they had fell out of love with school.
So would you say that they fell out of love with school, or they fell out of love with themselves because they believe the lie? They now believe that they're too stupid to be anything.
I would say, and I'm thinking about, as you're asking, Miss Steve, I'm thinking about 2 or 3 young people who impact me at that early part of my career, and having conversations with them. They wanted to learn. Mm-hmm. So I would say they fell out of love with school because they felt like school didn't love them. Right? So what does that look like? That looks like the teacher or even my classmates don't want me around. Mm-hmm. Right? That's falling out of love. I'm not welcome. I'm not being embraced. I'm not feeling good about the company I'm around, that type of thing. So yeah, they fell out of love in their mind, and they found other loves, and the other love was serious crime. crime that they repeatedly did. Even if they were incarcerated once or twice, they continued to do that because they found interest. Some of them, prior to getting incarcerated, may not make sense, but they found success in it to some extent. You know, you have to be brave and courageous to commit some of the crimes that they did. So they had courage, but they fell out of love with school and they fell out of love with education.
So they found something that loved them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason why I talk about it as believing the lie, because I did for a long time. And a lot of the people that I speak to, adults, especially adults, you know, have believed that lie for the majority of their life, that they're not good enough. So if I'm not going to be any better than what I am, why try? And crime is easy.
Crime's easy.
It's an open door. You know, it leaves the light on for you, literally.
Right.
Education is work. It's hard. It's something that you're going to put your effort into. And if you've never been successful at it, I mean, you got to think, you know, our testing right now, for years and years and years, the school system has told parents that we can't test your child for a learning disability until third grade. Well, that's already 4 years, kindergarten through third grade, the end of third grade. 4 years that child has been unsuccessful. And then you wonder why the child acts out in school.
Right.
It's constant. They don't ever get to get away from that feeling of failure every day they go to school. That's why our children have stomach aches and headaches, and I don't want to go, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And they're already setting the path. They're already setting their future up by doing this,
right.
by not getting the nutrients that they need, which is the education.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned crime is easy, you know, and I have a saying where I say failing is easy, right? Because failing is I don't have to do anything, right? And if I don't do anything, I don't do the work, I don't come to school, I don't pay attention, you know, I'm a fail. But that education, that's the work. Studying, that's the work. Attending regularly, that's the work. Asking critical thinking questions, that's the work. And it's the work on the teacher's end, the educator's end, to plan, to individualize, to personalize the lesson, to make certain that they know each child's individual academic needs. That's work too. And so you're right, crime is easy, failing is easy, because what happens is we just don't do anything and it continues. We continue not to do anything, and this cycle keeps continuing.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me that anybody would think that it would be okay to incarcerate, you know, these young kids like this, because there's nothing going to come good out of that. There's no you're not going to get the behavior modification and the education out of the punishment.
Right.
So, you know, when you were in the facilities, I mean, when you started giving these young men what they needed, the nourishment, the education that they needed, I mean, what did you see?
Right. And so on the early part of my career, again, I was the teacher. You know, I used that to propel my career because, as I said, I went back to school for education administration, eventually got my principal certificate, and went on from that facility to work in a couple of school districts. But when I had the opportunity to not only lead a school, but also be the leader inside the Philadelphia prison system in Philadelphia between 2004 and 2008, which was an adult facility, mind you, with juveniles who were being tried as adults. What I did then and throughout my career was really look at education from the perspective of incarcerated youth, right? So I looked at how students were receiving reading instruction or how we were delivering reading instruction. I paid close attention to how we train teachers on reading instruction or on reading curriculum. I paid close attention to younger students, kindergarten, first graders having struggles with learning their letters, learning 26 letters in 180 days, right? It would seem like you could learn 26 letters in 180 days, but still there's some struggles around doing that. So whether that's on the child's end or the instructional end, really understanding more about the 5 components of reading. So I took what I learned from the incarcerated youth, what I gleaned early on, and used that as a tool, as how I looked at education and how we looked at the delivery of education.
So what do you think the most, I mean, obviously we need to make sure that we help our teachers improve their reading instructions. I mean, what do you see there? I mean, one of the statistics that you said in your TED Talk was 39% of teachers get taught all 5 aspects of reading.
Right.
Only 39% of these teachers,
Right.
which marries up very closely, or I would say exactly, with the NAEP scores that just came out that shows 64% of 4th, 8th, and 12th graders don't read on grade level. So how do we change that?
Right. So my TED Talk was really the vision that I wanted to convey about this. How do we get better? Where do we go from here? Because we know about all the devastation prior to where we are now. And my approach now is really looking at teacher preparation programs, looking at, in my TED Talk, I talked about 39% of elementary education programs only only 39% teach the 5 components of reading, and really looking at where are these teacher preparation programs that are doing well or not doing well. Why aren't they teaching that? And I'm seeing how that translates into teacher recruitment and the type of teachers we bring in. And then once teachers are in school districts or independent schools or private schools, how are we continuing the training around reading instruction? And so what I found since the TED Talk is more information about a couple of things, Stephen. The format, I'll use that word, around how we approach professional development for teachers around reading instruction. We train them around the curriculum that we purchase. And when I say we, I'm talking about school districts and schools. We purchase a curriculum that is said is evidence-based, and it may be research-based, and it may be, but we train the teachers on implementing that curriculum. But when it gets to why a child is struggling with syllables, or why a child is struggling with letter sounds or fluency, what will the teacher do explicitly to help that child? That's the part that's missing. And so how we help teachers be more explicit in their action steps to increase reading performance is where we need to look at. And teacher preparation programs can start there for us, but school districts and schools who are delivering professional development, or state organizations, need to look at reading instruction from the aspect of helping teachers be more explicit on all the 5 components of reading.
Well, I mean, I would almost argue that I would be very leery of the terminology evidence-based and research-based, because the reading programs that are in our ISDs today completely leave out children with dyslexia.
Absolutely.
And if you teach the entire class the way that a dyslexic learns to read, everybody learns to read. So the fact that these teachers, the majority of teachers, I mean, it's becoming, I mean, we're doing a very good job out there advocating for, children with learning disabilities and dyslexia. Now we're getting, I mean, we've known about dyslexia since the 1800s. So, I mean, we've studied it. It's the most studied learning disability that there is.
Yeah.
So the fact that teachers, even new teachers and teachers that have been teaching that are on the end of their career, still don't know about dyslexia and what it is,
Yeah.
tells me that we have completely miss the boat.
That's 100%. Not only teachers, but principals.
Yep.
And I'll put myself in that boat. You know, I've learned more about dyslexia, and maybe social media is just a wonderful tool, but I've learned so much and received so much more information since the TED Talk about that aspect of dyslexia. And so when I compared that information that I received just since March, that's when the TED Talk came out, and thought about my career since then, that is dyslexia. The conversation is something that, you know, I haven't had with teachers. I may have had it with colleagues here and there, or special education leaders here and there. But in terms of, is that one of the barriers that we need to look at because of this young person's struggles with reading, has not been in the picture. And so what I found across the country in reading studies that have been sent to me, just connecting with people across the country, that this is another aspect that we need to really tackle.
I mean, the 64% that aren't reading on grade level from the NAEP scores, that's not a dyslexia problem. I mean, at best, we're 1 in 5. We're 20%. So 44% are not reading on grade level. That's an absolute failure of the system. And I mean, we're here to be and this is the thing that we say here on the show all the time, is we're here to be a partner in education, because it's a partnership. It's a partnership between the parents and the teachers and the administration and the parents and the administration. We're here to make sure that our children get the best education that they can, because they are our future. They're the most important thing that we have to develop, which is our child. To raise them up and put them out there and make sure that they're going to be successful. And not just push them through I mean, it's not a daycare. I mean, our school system is not a daycare center. We would need to make sure that they get educated properly so that they can go out and be successful. Otherwise, they're going to end up in the facilities like you were teaching in.
Well, they're there. They're ending up there. The common thread, again, whether they were juveniles or adults that are incarcerated, and you named it well, the data supports that there's a connection between incarceration and literacy. And that connection is poor instruction, not receiving the instruction, not being taught intentionally, not catching individual needs, like perhaps looking at dyslexia and then helping to support that. Parents not being brought into the loop early enough, and given that information or given that opportunity to have those kind of conversations. All of those things contribute to this pipeline.
Well, like we were talking the other day on the phone, you know, when I speak to administrators or teachers, people that run ARDs or 504 meetings, you know, I explain to them, if you're speaking to a parent of a child who has dyslexia, the chances of you speaking to a dyslexic at that point in time is very high. So, and a lot of times, especially if they're older parents, they probably weren't remediated or even identified. So we got to make sure that we're being supportive and being that good partner to understand exactly why we need to value education. And I think a lot of times when we have, especially in the poorer community, the less affluent community, we don't understand why the kids don't value the education, and then we don't understand why the parents don't value the education. Well, it's hereditary. You can't expect the parents to value the children to value the education if the parents don't either. And if the parents don't, it's probably because they weren't educated.
Right.
So they didn't get it. Yeah.
They had poor experiences in schools. I've seen that. Schools have engaged them to the extent of showing them the other side of school, right? Not just calling them because of behavior problems, but showing them the educational side, letting them visit classrooms, showing them the curriculum, even modeling lessons for them that they could use at home, and giving them the resources that they can use at home with their children. Those things are changing across. I wouldn't say schools and school districts aren't doing that kind of work, because they are, but more of that work needs to be done to engage the parent more into the educational process.
And I will say, with all the stuff that we've said, this is not an attack on teachers, because I think teachers have been failed also. Teachers have been failed by higher education because they didn't teach these teachers about learning disabilities, and or even, a lot of times they don't even believe that dyslexia is a real thing. They didn't set these teachers up for success, and then they get put into the classroom without the proper support from the ISD, from the states, from, the people that need to support them in order to properly educate these kids. So I feel for these teachers too. And I want to make sure that the teachers get what they need, so then they can turn around and, teach the masses. I mean, they went into this profession for a reason. It's not for the money.
Exactly. Teachers, and I've seen a lot of teachers over the years, and currently, teachers are powerful. Teachers are our best hope to get this right. And they need the resources. They need the training. They ask for it. They want it. They want to do their very best.
Absolutely.
They want their children to learn. They want help with removing barriers to those avenues of learning. And so the teacher training programs really, and the TEDx talk really looks at what we can do, at least in my perspective, in my opinion, what we can do going forward. And that is revisiting teacher preparation programs, and those that are doing a good job, because it's 39% that I spoke about, but the ones that are doing a good job, looking at what they're doing and looking at their practices and modeling those practices. But the caveat that I wanted to add with the TED Talk was the exposure to the incarcerated youth. And just listening, it transformed my career. Just listening to incarcerated youth and them getting me to care more about their learning and to care more about teaching and learning, I wanted to expose university-based prep programs to incarcerated youth stories.
Absolutely. I mean, when I go out and speak, when I get done, I'll have grown men, adults coming up to me crying, telling me that how did I know? I told their life story. When I tell them about how I grew up and the struggles that I went through. So, I mean, you hit on a really great thing. If you just sit down and listen, take the time to listen to what these kids are saying, because they're going to tell you exactly what they need. And they know why they're failing. They know what it is. They may need a little bit of help properly explaining it, but they know.
They know. And they'll tell you the truth. And they're going to tell it to you smack dab in your face. It may not be cute, but they're going to let you know. It's the harsh reality that can only overwhelm you, but also inspire you to do something. And that's what they did for me throughout my career. And when I speak to children, when I speak to parents, I'm always thinking about those experiences in my mind as I'm articulating and communicating ways that we can help people.
So how would that look to you to have these incarcerated youth helping the higher ed, or the teachers to be, the ones that are in college now, they're doing teacher prep? How would that look to you?
Yeah. So I laid out several steps in my TED Talk, but the main one was the last one where I talked about field work. And in every teacher preparation program, you do what's called student teaching. And so doing student typically is it's school district schools, maybe even in charter schools, private schools may engage in that, but doing your student teaching work inside of a correctional facility, inside of a juvenile justice education location or setting, and really honing your practices, your student teaching practices in that setting. But that will give you access and exposure to the incarcerated youth. in terms of questions you can ask them, stories they can share with you, data that you could see, getting a better understanding of their background with literacy, why they felt like they didn't do well with literacy. Maybe it was something that impacted student-teacher relationships that they had, that they want to convey to these new aspiring teachers, so that they can walk away with a better idea of the importance of reading instruction when they hit the classroom on day one. When they hit the classroom as a kindergarten teacher or first grade teacher, having that exposure and experience and knowledge on day one as to what it could look like for a child if they don't get reading instruction right would be powerful.
It would be unbelievably powerful to know what the end result is if you don't get the beginning right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, one of the other things that we talked about is, one of the things that I would love to see is federal guidelines that mandate that states, all states and all districts acknowledge that dyslexia is real, and that we can, or the parents can, transfer their IEP and or 504 plans throughout the states. Because the other piece of it that we generally don't talk about is we see this in the military a lot. When the military is moving from state to state, a lot of times those IEPs don't transfer.
Right.
And then they have to start all over again. And if you move into a state that doesn't believe in dyslexia,
right,
where are you at now?
When you said that to me the other day, and we talked the other day, that stayed with me, that you would have to start over. So that's an area that can be fixed. That's a policy and practice area that should be fixed. But something else you said to me the other day, and I'm pondering, and I don't know if you told me it was widespread or just in certain areas of the country, but you said dyslexia was linked to, not linked, I'm sorry, that's not the word, that when we address dyslexia in some areas, it's through the 504 plan. And as a result, they're not getting the same resources as if they had an IEP.
That's exactly right. I mean, here in Texas.
Yeah, that has to change, because I'm familiar with the 504 and IEP, and certainly, both of them have value for the children that have them, but not to have an IEP for dyslexia, that stayed with me when you told me that.
Yeah, what's not explained to parents a lot of times is when you are under special education, and I understand special education has some negative connotations to that word. However, we have to get past however you want to say it. We have to get over the fact that special education is not a place. It's not something we put our child into. It's a service. It's services that we can provide to make sure that our student or child is successful. Right. And when you're in special education, you not only get the protections under IDEA, you get protections under ADA also. Mm-hmm. And that's for the parent and the student. And if you're under 504, you only get those protections under ADA. And most people don't realize that a 504 or Americans with Disability Act was really put in place for accommodations, not remediation.
Right.
So I agree. I mean, it is so split down the middle on, do we put your kid in special education? Do we put them over here? A lot of it has to do with funding, and, states wanting to say that dyslexia is a general education problem, or it's this problem or that. Look, if we really want to get down to brass tacks, it's a medical problem.
Right. And
we need proper identification and proper instruction in order to make sure that we can be successful.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. Yeah. So what would be your call to actions that we can leave our viewers with?
Mm-hmm. So couple of things. One, for parents. I want to see parents, and schools have to really lead this effort, and teachers as well, to be a part of the classroom experience, to really understand what questions to ask schools and to ask their teachers about the progress of their children academically, but also with reading instruction, particularly our youngest children, our kindergarten, first and second grade students, because that's the space where they're learning how to read, and knowing what they can do at home for their children, knowing what resources they can use at home, modeling lessons for them so that they can also teach their child at home, assess their child at home, progress monitor their child at home. So schools need to really invite parents in to really have conversations about reading instruction, involving the community, partners, looking at our daycare centers, looking at our early childhood centers, because they transition young people into kindergarten and first grades, and making certain that our child care centers are also focused on reading instruction. But more importantly, incarcerated youth. I want to always get back to the perspective of incarcerated youth. I want the universities to really look at changing their curriculum, changing their student teaching practices, where incarcerated youth could be a resource to help improve teaching reading instruction.
So I would like to add a couple of things to your call to action. First, for parents, absolutely ask tons of questions. Tons of questions. Don't take the first time that somebody says, "Oh, XYZ," as the gospel. Respectfully take the information in. You need to go research what it is that they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I find a lot of times that unknowingly, the parents are being told wrong information. Mm-hmm. We got to make sure that the information that we're being told is correct. Number one. Two, making sure that you're that partner in education in every aspect. You talk about going into the classroom as a parent. It is amazing to do. You get to see more than your child in class. You get to see the kids that are around your child, that your children are exposed to, that the behavior that is going on in the school. So you get a whole different aspect of public education when you get to go in and see all of these things. So you get to have a better understanding of struggles that not only the school is dealing with, but the other children are dealing with.
Greater perspective. Much greater.
Absolutely.
Parents should be able to do learning walks.
Absolutely.
Where they visit classrooms, and it could be periodic. It could be every marking period or whatever. It doesn't have to be daily, but the opportunity to go into classrooms, not just their child's classroom, but classrooms in the school, take feedback on their own about what they see, what they hear, have opportunities to debrief with the principal around what they saw and heard, and perhaps some of that information could translate into improvements, changes, or something that maybe the principal did not see or notice.
Right.
So that would be a healthy opportunity to be a part of school improvement.
I think the last thing, in something that I've really come to a conclusion about, is parents also need to take ownership in the school.
Absolutely.
This is your ISD. You pay for this public education with your tax dollars. Take some ownership in it. Make sure that you go to your school board meetings. Make sure that you're aware of what is being proposed and the curriculum that is being proposed to go into, your state and your district. I mean, this is parenting is an action word. I mean, we have to make sure that we get out and do certain things, but we also have to make sure that we educate ourselves properly. So when we go in and have these conversations, we are not perceived as that parent.
Absolutely. But Stephen, let me just, and I'm with you 100%. And schools should want to do that.
Yes.
And again, many schools are doing it, districts are doing it. So that's happening. So that's clear. I understand that. But more of schools wanting parents to be better informed, better able to help the school and their child is so urgent and so important. So yes, parents should be making those steps to help themselves and get better with doing that. But the school should be encouraging enough and welcoming enough to want their parents of their children that are their students to help them get to that point.
And I do know that here, if your child goes to a Title I school, and you can find that information out by, either asking your school or asking the district, you have the right to go in and observe and partner at any time.
Yeah.
They can't tell you no.
Right.
So make sure that you exercise those rights.
Absolutely.
So one of my big pushes is killing this pipeline to prison. Mm-hmm. So Empower Dyslexia is putting together a task force of experts on how do we handle this? How do we go in and make sure that we do this on a couple different levels? We do it from before they get into the system, and then once they get to into the system, how do we make sure that we educate them so that we don't have that recidivism?
Right.
And I would like to ask you here if you would like to be on our advisory council, our task force. I think your wealth of knowledge and your passion and your experience would be hugely beneficial to making sure that we turn that dial off and cut this pipeline to prison.
I'm with you, Stephen. As I told you the other day, I'm with you. I like your ideas. This school to prison pipeline cannot just be a tag word and something that we debate or something we have just discussions about. This school to prison pipeline is a real pipeline. Students are really going to jail, Stephen. They're going to prison. And again, the common thread is reading instruction. And so if we do not look at the pipeline, school to prison pipeline, from reading instruction and not looking at it from the behavior, but reading instruction is probably the reason for the behavior, we're missing the boat.
Yep. Well, I mean, we
asked about what was one of the my takeaways or one of my action calls. I would add that looking at the school to prison pipeline from the reading instruction perspective is important.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we already know that, the majority of prisons, especially state prisons, they're to incarcerate somebody for a year, it's like $47,000.
Lots of money.
So we're either going to pay now when they're not, we haven't destroyed a child, we'll pay now, or we pay later and we have to try to fix a broken child or a broken man at that point.
Right. And we'll pay later if we don't, even the young people who are in prison and in jail, if we don't get reading instruction correct in those settings.
Yep.
So, I wrote my book, Unlocking Potential, Organizing a School Inside a Prison, because I wanted to expose readers and just anyone in general about education inside of a correctional setting. But we have to get instruction right there too. And nationally, and there's research and studies and those type of things on education inside of correctional settings. And that needs to improve as well. Because if they're going to return to the community, and we talk about we want less recidivism, then we have to get education right inside those settings as well.
You talk about the study. I'll send you the study, and I can put a link to the study on our website. But there was another study done on the Texas prisons, and they were specifically looking at recidivism, mm-hmm. and the amount of money that they would save just to get that child to a 9th grade reading level, or that adult to a ninth grade reading level was millions of dollars. And they would cut recidivism rate dramatically,
Right.
just getting them to a ninth grade reading level. And not even, graduating or a 12th grade reading level, just ninth grade.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't, it's so entwined and tied together. You can't separate it. It is together, and we have to stop it. You talked about your book. Ziggy, can you put the cover of his book up real quick?
Yep, give me just a sec.
And so can you tell our audience where you can find your book?
Absolutely. Thank you. The book, Unlocking Potential, Organizing a School Inside a Prison, can be purchased at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and OutskirtsPress.com. Or you can go to my website, Hilderbrand Pelzer 3.com. And I have links on my website that will give you access to the book.
I'm so impressed with you and your dedication to education and your dedication to the most needy. And a lot of times, I'm talking from my own personal experience. A lot of times, we feel like we're not deserving of somebody to care and to really want to educate us. So I want to thank you for being there for these young men, these children that need that person. They need that person in their life to not only motivate them, but make them feel that they're good enough and that they are smart enough. So what I want to do is I'm going to give away 10 of your books. I'm going to buy 10 of your books and give them away.
Thank you, Stephen.
All you have to do to I'll put the names and whatever else in a hat and let you draw it. I don't care. Like this this podcast and video, subscribe to both Mr. Pelzner's YouTube and Facebook, and share it, comment, and we'll put your name down and we'll give away 10 of your books.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Stephen. And anyone who would have the opportunity to read my book will learn a lot about the school to prison pipeline, but more importantly, what education can do to transform young people who are incarcerated, because the book is about education. It's about teaching and learning. It's not about crime, although that's the prison is the backdrop, but it's about education and hope.
I mean, we as the general public have no idea what we're missing by having all of these people in prison. We have no idea the amount of economic hit that we take for having all these people in prison. I mean, when you're talking about the children that are going to the juvenile center as elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
that bill for the public has already started racking up.
Yes.
So they'll never come out. Well, I say never. It'll be very hard for them to come out of prison and be a productive member, tax-paying member of society.
Right.
And then not even to talk about the social and emotional side where they, you've taken that person away from their family and the society. So again, I want to thank you so much. You are an amazing person. I'm so honored to have you on the show, and can't wait to work alongside you to turn this pipeline off, to shut it off for good, because these are our kids. You can't, the system can't have them.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you, Stephen. I appreciate you reaching out to me. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the TED Talk. I appreciate our conversations offline about this topic and your ideas and how we can put these ideas together to make a big difference in this area of reading instruction. So thank you, and thank you to your audience for taking the time to listen to me. It means a lot.
Well, I want to invite you back anytime. I think that we need to continually have this conversation and really break this down into smaller segments so people can get a true understanding and vision of what it is that we're talking about in these areas. So please come back. You're invited anytime. I want to make sure that we, at the end of the show, we ask you, please like us on Facebook, subscribe, like us and subscribe on YouTube, on any of the apps that you listen to. If you're listening to this podcast, please leave us a comment. This helps us with our sponsorship, and this is going to help us in driving a wedge and turning this pipeline to prison off. I mean, this is something that we have to do as a society. At the end of every show, we always like to recommend that if you think that your child is having issues as early as possible, please make sure that you go in and request them to be tested for any known disabilities. Knowing is half the battle. Once you understand what you're dealing with, then you know how to put the services in place to make sure that your child is successful, and you're averting that possibility for that at risk or that pipeline to prison. We have an evaluation letter template on our website that you can download. You can go to www.empowerdyslexia.info and download one of the templates. Just fill out your information, take it to your school counselor, request the testing. Do it sooner than later. You'll be thankful. Your child will be thankful. We can stop the frustration that your children are feeling and that you're feeling, trying to make sure that your child gets the best education possible. I want to say thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate all of the support, and we'll see you next time.
Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empower Dyslexia podcast. At Learning Ally, we are always looking for new ways to engage readers struggling with a reading deficit like dyslexia and help them work to their potential. Visit www.learningally.org to learn about the Learning Ally audiobook solution, including which of your students are eligible for access. If you live in Texas, we have great news. The Texas Education Agency provides access to the Learning Ally audiobook solution for all K-12 public and charter school students with reading deficits. Get started today by visiting www.learningally.org/Texas.